The sun did some pretty cool things the last week or so, and even just in the last few hours. So, this is just from today. Not long ago, this is the sun we're looking at in a specific wavelength that comes back as blue light, and it shows solar flares pretty easily. In this, you can see magnetic field lines around sunspots, and boom, there was a blast. It got really bright. So, this is having a increase with our lightning, based on certain properties of some of the solar activity going on. There's radiation storms embedded in some of this that's going on, has been, and there's another one that will. So there was a big coronal mass ejection here, and different wavelengths will show us different types of phenomenon. So I'll come back to this and show you that in other wavelengths, such as the 304 angstroms, where we can see filament and filament channels better, and what that meant for the side of the sun facing right toward Earth. There was also something embedded in there we couldn't see in the other wavelength that's increasing lightning production on Earth. So it's pretty clear to see on the coronagraph that something just happened again. There was another CME, and it's those other views from the satellite, those different colors of light, that will help dissect where this plasma is actually coming from. And this coronagraph was just kind of gives us a good view that, all right, there's something that left the sun. Now we can go dissect what it was. Because it could be X-rays, it could be proton event, it could be multiple things at once, and these will have different effects on Earth, maybe causing aurora or messing up radio communications, giving us extra cloud condensation nuclei for storms. This was just our first named storm of the year so far for North America anyway, just ahead of our hurricane season starting. And then a quick view of some of the severe storms that really is being a good example here of how these radiation storms increase lightning. So I'll go back to the coronagraph in a moment and show you a radiation storm as it's happening. But it's been said through studies that the fast-moving solar wind can help increase lightning at Earth, and also radiation storms can help ionize the upper levels of the atmosphere and cause lightning. So this isn't playing through for some reason. Maybe if I change the speed. No good, but this actually shows the lightning how much there is. So I'll just force it through, and you can see all the blinking. So there's a ton of lightning in these severe storms that are passing the southeast United States today. A couple of them have been tornado warned, but this isn't a huge outbreak. But as far as lightning is concerned, that is insane. There's a lot of intra-cloud lightning and cloud-to-ground lightning going on right now. Very, very high amounts of it. So when this thing actually plays, I like this feature on windy.com, just that it makes the noises with the lightning, kind of gives an indication. Also with audio as to how much lightning there is. I mean, that is a ton. So back to the coronagraph, showing how this can kind of be linked. This is Space Weather Prediction Center that is sharing the LASCO instrument. And if you look closely here, you'll see that there's just this white scattering. It can be called a blizzard, and these are radiation storms. It's actually while the solar wind out in outer space is passing this instrument, parts of the particles embedded in the wind that make up the wind, the magnetic field of it, they're actually emitting light. So it could either be that they're moving so fast, they have chemical reactions with other atoms, and they beam out a photon of light. And for different reasons, we'll see that there's this beaming. Now, all of a sudden, I'm noticing this one moving toward it. That's interesting. I wonder if that is what that might be, like a comet or a planet. I'm very new to this. If it's something like a planet or a star, I've noticed that we'll see a big beam of light and what's called an electron discharging, I think, like with a line of light that we saw last month as things were circulating around in front of Earth and also reflecting light back. But this one moving toward the sun, that's interesting to me. So yeah, there's a lot that can be gathered from this. But now with all of this scattering, all of that, what's called a blizzard, the kind of a snow-like look, we see what would be considered kind of a minor radiation storm. So if we scroll up to the Space Weather Prediction Center site, we see that there's no radiation storm in the 24-hour observed maximums or the latest observations. But for predictions coming up here, there is a 15% chance of an R1 to R2. And I would go ahead and say that's possible considering that that instrument in space is already showing indications of that. And with respect to Earth and where that wind will be traveling next, there's some small bits that will probably very well pass Earth. So more storms with extra lightning again. These storms really lit up the last couple of days, and it was just a couple days ago that we had our last radiation storm here. So the sun is actually beginning to have more solar storms as we tend toward solar maximum. I'll see if I can get, Europe had some weather moving in also in the UK. See if I can see what it's looking like for them on the close-up view. It's more the northern hemisphere now, so things are shifting a little as we're getting further into spring. We can talk about that too. So there's the spring differences now, and there's also solar cycle differences. My professor called it the Terminator as far as the solar cycles go. Every 11 to 14 years, we go through new solar cycles where the magnetic field on the sun actually changes from a bipolar to a toroidal field. And in that process, the solar activity, like where the storms are on the sun, will actually change, and it can be tracked in certain wavelengths. So that terminator I'm speaking of is best seen in a different wavelength. So I'll minimize this one and go to the wavelength that it's easier to notice it in, where we can see coronal holes. So here we go. It's 193 angstroms, and this is on SDO satellite. And with this, we'll notice that there's some black spots. And if you've been watching these videos, or if you track space weather at all, or are familiar with coronal holes, you'll know that these black regions were closer to this equator, the solar equator, about a month ago, a couple months ago. So there's what was called a rushing to the poles. Is what scientists will call this, is when these darker regions called coronal holes end up at the same time going from this part in the southern hemisphere, this part in the northern hemisphere, they rush toward their pole. And that is kind of an indication then, has been observed now, that it means from here on out, all these new storms, for the most part, more of them should have the same magnetic field orientation as solar cycle 25, that now we're not so much in the beginning phases of solar cycle 25, but we're really getting ramped up into it, and we're going to start seeing more sunspots and more solar storms, so more bright regions soon. And what I wanted to, I'm curious here now, so this wavelength here shows dark spots there. It's one I'm not as familiar with, 211. I'll play it out and see what it looks like, and learn some more about this. I'm now in my, just completing my first year of space weather studies, so I'm getting better at understanding this stuff, but there's always more to learn with this kind of thing anyway. But so there was this big blast that was pretty obvious, but there's also a lot going on here. And so with the 304, we can see more of the filament channels, and I'll open that up and just play it out before I close off here. And then we'll just keep tracking this, because then in another couple of days, I'll look at where the next storms are going to be forming. Looks like a little drive, probably for the most part for the U.S. coming up here, but in the northern hemisphere then, as this next radiation storm heads towards Earth, in a couple of days, we'll probably see even more lightning than what's going on now in the same areas where the storms are being created. So let's keep an eye right here and see. This is something that would be coming right toward Earth. If something leaves here, then Earth is right in its way. So yeah, I'll be sharing more and more about this. You can go ahead and find more information about this stuff on Facebook. I started a group called Space and Earth Weather. So thanks for watching. This is meteorologist Amy Metz. I'll also share more on the hurricane, because, not hurricane season, that is. We have a tropical storm out there finally brewing, and this shall be moving slowly along the coast, staying out at sea, some dry air more and more wrapping in, and really closing out soon. So everyone enjoy your weather, stay prepared.